There we go. There we go.
Okay, so we are officially called to order, the Finance Committee, and we're here to receive, I believe, the results of the audit, and also have two other matters to discuss. So why don't we just jump in?
Sounds
Kevin?
Great. So here today to present the results of our audit. If you look at the 4 documents that have been provided, you might see that they are in draft format. Couple key points to make on that. It is through the entirety of our auditing procedures as well as our QC process. It has been passed or kind of policy of this committee to receive drafts in case they have any questions or input. They could have input upon the final issuance. So I say all of that to say sometimes when things are in draft, it means we're 90% done. It means 95% done. We are 100% done with the exception of obtaining the approval of this or the acceptance of this committee. As you remember from our planning discussions, we really focus our efforts in 3 distinct areas. The audit of the federal grant compliance, the audit of the state grant compliance, as well as the financial statements. As I've mentioned to past committees, this is your operations are somewhat unique in that quite often financial statements are the focus, and the single audit or those grant compliance audits are really kind of a byproduct of it. For workforce, it's kind of reversed. That grant compliance with federal and state is the focus of our audit. It drives the financial statement numbers because it's 99% of the operations. And then the financial statements, we have to go back through and figure out, okay, what did we not touch? And then provide the auditing procedures on those. We are prepared to issue unmodified opinions on all 3 reports. That's the highest level of assurance that we can provide as independent auditors. A couple key points to make with that. We can have numerous exceptions, whether it be waived audit adjustments, booked audit adjustments, in order to arrive at that unmodified opinion. In the case of this set of financial statements, we did not have any adjustments to the underlying books and records. So what was presented to us by the management team was ultimately what is included within the financial statements. And I think that is kind of key item 1 to take away from the unmodified opinion. Key item 2 is the report or the results of our test of internal controls. So unlike say a PCAOB audit where we're opining upon internal controls, this is really a byproduct of our testing of internal controls in order to perform our risk assessment as well as determine the nature and extent of substantive procedures we need to perform. We did not note any material weaknesses or significant deficiencies that would be required to be reported to the board or to this committee, nor did we denote any deficiencies that have been passed along either orally or written. So clean audit, both from an adjustment standpoint as well as an internal control standpoint. From the federal single audit perspective, I would direct your attention, or I'm going to direct my attention.
I can share a screen too if you want, Kevin, or you can.
Perfect.
All right.
And I'm going to page 11, Ashley.
Of federal.
Yes.
Okay.
Probably the 2 most important reports, again, because of the nature of the operations, are the federal and the state single audit. And in each case of these 2 reports, we reconcile what's recorded here in note 4, what's recorded in the financial statements to that's included within the schedule of expenditure of federal awards. But this is something that is a required format, but I think it's really from a board perspective or a user perspective, very user-friendly and kind of walks you through what you need to know from an audit perspective. So it's the summary of auditors' results. And again, from a financial statement perspective, we've issued an unmodified opinion. We have no material weaknesses nor significant deficiencies identified. From a federal award perspective, We again did not have any material weaknesses or significant deficiencies. So the federal awards prescribe exactly what compliance we have to test, but then we're also required to test the internal controls that management has in place over ensuring compliance, and we did not note any deficiencies there. Nor did we have any other minor or significant or minor findings that are required to be disclosed in accordance with federal statutes. In the current year, we had two major programs that would have been the focus of our audit, the child care cluster and the WIO cluster. The and when we get to the state, you'll see that the one major program that we tested there was one of these as well. So the way workforce works, they receive both federal and state monies, and it's an allocation process, but the internal controls over expenditures and compliance are the same. The dollar threshold distinguished between type A and type B programs is $3 million. That's based upon the level of expenditures or federal expenditures that you received, and whether or not the auditee qualified as a low-risk auditee. That's based upon information from the past, whether you've been subject to single audits for each of the past 2 years, whether findings were had, etc. Whether or not you're a low risk or non-low risk auditee really only results in how many audit or major programs we're required to test. For a low risk auditee, we're required to get 20% coverage. For a high risk auditee, we're required to get 40% coverage. If you go back and look at the impact of these two major programs, you see that we were clearly in excess of both the 20% and the 40% thresholds. Section 2 and Section 3, we've really kind of already addressed that there were 0 findings to be reported. A couple other kind of key communications. We have performed our evaluation on our independence. We believe that we are independent from the board in both appearance as well as fact. We performed our procedures in accordance with the plan that we set forth previously, as well as performed and our auditing procedures were in accordance with both government auditing standards and generally accepted auditing standards. From a financial statement perspective, you will note an emphasis of matter paragraph in the current year. The entity was required to adopt the new GAAP based upon the leasing standard. This is an area where we see lots of clients having significant problems from a completeness and accuracy standpoint, as well as arriving upon the estimate of the future fair value of the right to use assets. Management did a tremendous job in identifying, executing, and recording this liability, as well as the right to use asset. So we point this out because it had a material impact upon both the asset and the liability as an emphasis of matter, but it had 0 impact upon our opinion as it relates to the financial statements. So again, every year's audit has to stand on its own, but this was a very successful audit from an internal control perspective, from a compliance standpoint, as well as any audit adjustments. And with that, Corey and myself would be happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, this is an outstanding conclusion and result, Kevin, and I want to commend you, not only from my standpoint, but the prior treasurer. We've always been impressed with your candor and your rigor. My questions are going to be behind the fold, I guess, a little bit. Did you have any problems at all with cooperation, obtaining documents, and transparency during your audit?
And you can see Corey already shaking her head no. Ashley, I'm going to ask you to pull up the SAS 114 letter.
Yes.
And we are going to, and this is the required communications, most of which I have covered. And I apologize, Harry, because it's an excellent question and one that I should have addressed. But if you go to page 4, Ashley, and I'll go through this very quickly because clearly I've missed something already. Variety of required communications, the fact that we're independent, whether or not any significant estimates, that we conducted our audit in accordance with auditing standards. The last section, other communications, is really kind of a standard blurb, and it's really about whether or not we had significant difficulties encountered during the audit or disagreements with management. So one, Corey has shook her head no. I'm going to tell you no, but there's also written documentation for file, for public information, et cetera, that management worked with us incredibly well. An audit is a very iterative process. You guys can say that word, I can't. Where we ask for a lot of information that drives us to a lot of different questions, a lot of additional requests for information. Management responded to us in a timely, comprehensive format. Absolutely no issues, Harry. Long answer when Corey shook her head no, and that probably should have been enough.
No, that's very good to hear. We want you to make our lives as hard as possible, and we want to be able to show that we made your life as easy as possible. That's the excellence we're aiming for. Treasury is mindful of how important this work is, and I just wanted to give you an opportunity to give us any comments or anything that's outside this report that you thought was noteworthy at this time. Anything that you want to add?
No, not at this time. And I think management has an excellent process for lack of better words, predicting the future. If you notice from both the financial statement perspective as well as the federal grants, this is probably the highest level of federal awards that the entity has received. It will ebb and flow based upon both the political world as well as financial world. So being able to really manage to those numbers, and your entity does an incredible job of outsourcing and utilizing subrecipients to where they don't hire up for increased funding and then have to go down. But just the ability to really manage, I think, is absolutely critical. The only other thing that I would say and it's within the scope of the audit, but we always say that one of the things that we share is there's this concept of materiality, which is both quantitative and qualitative. And from a single audit perspective, which is the grants, the federal government really tells us what is material. Now, with that said, we probably take a look at it below that because of the nature of the entity, in that disallowed cost, question cost, et cetera, could have a tremendous impact upon the organization because there's no other, no significant other funding sources. So from a viability and a going concern perspective on the financial statements, that compliance with federal grants is absolutely critical. I'll tell mayors and city managers and state agency heads that compliance with federal regulations is critical. For you guys, it's super critical. And it's something that management has in place to address and in, quite honestly, in many cases, best practices.
Kevin and perhaps Corey, is there anything that during the pendency of this audit, either by rule making, rule changing, proposed regulation that changed that we need to know of going forward? In other words, is there an overlap there where something material changed in the federal rules?
Not within the federal rules, and then from a generally accepted accounting principle, that lease standard that we talked about on a go-forward basis.
Okay. Yeah, so we'll sit down and talk about that and make the plans that we need to. Anyone else? Dan, Alicia, anyone have any questions?
I just wanted to follow up. I appreciate the fact that this is a very clean audit and shows that the organization is doing quite well in this regard. But there's a materiality standard, as you mentioned, and I'm just looking at this point to see if there's any improvements that you would recommend, or any deficiencies or weaknesses that fell below that materiality standard, any ways that things could be improved here. And one of the things that I always worry about being on a government board with the Dallas School Board is that the reputational interest and damage that you could have something that is doesn't rise to the level of a significant deficiency or material weakness, but it really makes the public mad that there's been, waste or a failure to comply with the rules. So I'm wondering if there are things below those lines that that could be improved, or any issues that you came across.
Dan, it's a great question, and I think the first thing I can do to answer that question from a candidness perspective is kind of try to define that line for you. So any findings from a federal or a state compliance perspective, and this is either known or likely. So if in our sample of 60 items, we had one exception, but if we extrapolated that and said it had, 1 out of 60, and we know that there were 3,000 instances, so we can extrapolate that one up. If there are any findings greater than $25,000, and when you think about 25,000 in comparison to 175 million, very small materiality number, we would be required to disclose that both to you as an audit committee, as well as here as part of our written report to both the feds and state. So no, nothing below the line of any concern. Second, if I had to take, switch roles with you for a second, and I do believe that management has proper controls and processes and procedures to address this. But, one of the things that I said was great about what y'all do is the utilization of subrecipients, et cetera. But anytime you have third party, you have third party risk. And when I think of the publicity risk and a variety of things that you just talked about, those items that could end up making, creating a black eye in the newspaper or on Channel 11 at night probably would have happened at the third party versus within the four walls of WFS. With that said, you guys have an extensive process with 2 separate CPA firms engaged, both well-known and respected within this industry, that perform a variety of oversight monitoring on almost on a continuous basis of those subrecipients. So I think that you've mitigated that risk. I think it's incredibly important to continue to mitigate that risk. And from an audit committee perspective, the reports of those other accountants and auditors that look at those subrecipients, likely just as important as understanding the results of the Crow audit. And again, I think because you have one primary oversight in the Texas workforce, you get a little more scrutiny than perhaps what you would at a local government or an ISD that may have multiple federal fundings, et cetera. TWC is within your four walls quite often, as well as subject to clear visibility of everything that goes through it, because everything is loaded to within the TWIST system. So I think that there are, long answer to say there is third-party risk, but I think you guys have an adequate mechanisms in place to address that risk. But it's incredibly important to continue to monitor that from your role, that in fact continues to occur.
So you came across nothing along the lines of, there's a $10,000 reimbursement that wasn't properly documented or anything like that?
No.
So, okay. All right. Again, I am concerned that, anything along those lines, while not rising to the level of materiality, rises to the level of practical materiality, if I could coin a phrase, in terms of the organization's reputational risk. And if you had discovered anything like that, I would just like to like to know that, being particularly sensitive to the way the public views organizations, even with a clean audit technically. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point, Dan. I think there's two categories there, and it's the measure of your independence is shown by the ability to tell us things that we could do better at as we go forward, even if they don't make it into the audit report per se. So appreciate that. Lori, you might have to help me out here, but there was an incident, and I think it was resolved, where someone was defrauded in the camp. I'm not sure where that fell in the timing of this audit, but were you made aware of that incident, Kevin?
Yeah, it was within the timing of the audit, and we were made aware of it. And we actually looked at both the request for reimbursement as well as the ultimate insurance settlement. So that was I wouldn't have called it significant from a materiality standpoint, but I definitely would have called it unusual. And we look at all significant and unusual transactions.
Mm-hmm. And after looking at that, what was your takeaway from it?
You know, I think one, the internal controls that failed were at the subrecipient versus really at the board level. With that said, I think the board said, okay, what else can we do to prevent this from occurring in the future if others have such issues? As well as, you know, just the sheer fact of being insured, requiring insurance, a variety of contractual controls, although those are, you know, kind of after the fact, all of those were in place. And again, we saw nothing that should have been done differently beforehand.
Thank you. Anybody else? Hi, Carter.
Hi, Carter. I do have a question, Kevin. If I can go back to the federal report and on the state report too, we qualified as a low risk auditee. And I wanted to ask about our 2023 audit with our change in president. I remember when our previous CFO left, I want to say that although I moved into the CFO role, we became a high risk auditee for the year. Is my memory correct? And will that happen for 2023 due to personnel changes?
So great question, Ashley. And I would have to go back to look at if in fact you moved from low risk to high risk, but if that, or not low risk, if that did in fact occur, it would have been as a result of findings in the previous years.
Oh.
So this low risk concept from a federal and a state grant is very formulaic, and you either do or do not meet the criteria. Very limited auditor judgment to be able to tip those scales. Now, that's kind of the simplistic answer. The more nuanced answer. So answer is next year you will can still be a low risk auditee. But I will say transition of upper management, of leadership, et cetera, from both a financial statement as well as grant compliance, et cetera, when I think of my inherent risk as well as control risk, there could have been significant changes. So I will most likely assess those internal risk assessments at a higher level, which would drive more testing and a variety of those things. So here you would still be considered low risk, but from an execution of my auditing procedures, it will have an impact upon my auditor judgment.
Kevin, if I could just timing issue. I am here for most of 23, which was not anticipated when we talked first time. So we're not sure when I leave at this point, or when the new exec joins. But I would think more of that occurs in 24 than in 23. And I am very concerned about the state monitors come in November. I would like to be of an assistance to the board just to make sure there's continuity. November is going to be a big thing. We just finished the AT&T audit of our technology. We improved over 2 years ago. We are higher in our accomplishments than other boards in the state. In other words, everything is on an uptick, and I would hate to see anything change that.
Laurie, that's excellent news to hear. And for most clients, for what I'm about to say, somebody could probably take exception to it, but I don't believe that you will, because it's what you've engaged us to do. It'll still be part of my risk assessment. You know, if I told a story that you guys weren't so familiar with and just said, I have a client who's had a 30-year leadership position and now knows what the end date is. You know, if anything was to ever be nefarious, it might be when that person knew that they were exiting the building. So that will have it. We're glad to hear it because it will bring stability, but it will still be part of our overall risk assessment and drive our procedures. It's something that we will factor in. Tone at the top, you know, everybody listens to the boss, but if they believe the boss is 1 foot out the door and 1 foot in, maybe they don't listen as closely. So it will be part of our of how we execute next year's audit, and quite honestly was part of how we viewed it this year. So it does have an impact.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? All right. Thank you very much, Kevin. So I guess at this stage we are moving to accept the results of the audit report at this stage.
We will, upon completion of that, we will take it to final and be prepared to issue to the board final.
Thank you. Ashley, why don't you address the second point we have?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Kevin and Corey. You're welcome to stay, but if you would like to head
Corey,
out.
you wore us out. You're too talkative.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks,
Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you. Y'all take care.
You too.
All right, so the second item on our agenda this morning is ratification of risk management coverage renewals. I'll go ahead and share my screen again and take you up to the top of this page. So Marsh & McLennan Agency is our broker for all of our insurance outside of employees' health insurance, and these coverages all run from July 1st through June 30th. We last procured for our broker in the spring of 2021, and procurement rules allow us to keep this broker for up to 4 years in the procurement cycle. So after the 2024-2025 cycle next year, we will need to re-procure. We had no changes in coverage for the 2023-2024 year, and our annual premium remained very stable from prior year. In fact, we saw a slight overall decrease in premiums of 0.9%. Our broker tells us that cyber rates should be leveling out over the next year or so. Here's our cyber liability at the bottom of page 2. We all saw jumps in these costs over the past few years. I'm sorry, let me turn the light back on. Here we go. I haven't been moving around enough. So we did all see jumps in these costs over the last few years, and our broker anticipates that they may start decreasing in the coming years as competition increases. I have on the screen the schedule of insurance for this year. Like I said, it's very similar to prior year. We discussed it last summer's meeting. I know you all received this prior to the meeting, and if you have any questions about our coverages or want us to look into anything additional, I'll be happy to take those questions to the broker before our next board meeting, in which we will want to request board ratification to approve our coverage for this 2023-2024 cycle. So my question to you all is, have you had a chance to kind of look through our coverage? Did you have any questions, any concerns?
I have looked through it, didn't have questions, concerns. Anyone else have any questions, concerns, comments?
I wanted to make a point that we we probably peaked in our federal receipts last year in COVID last year, 22. So we are seeing a decline now in funding, not extreme. Just want to make that on the record with the entire board, Ashley, when we do meet, because I think we're getting some people who are misreporting the size of our budget. So the budget had
Lori,
tipped.
what's your projection on that decline? How steep?
Not bad right now, but I'm not too sure with this Congress what we get into in election year and when they finally get into budget. It can be as severe as 12%. That's called sequestration. We have not seen that for over 2 decades. I hope it will not come back to play. Probably a 5 to 7% reduction. Generally, we are very popular among people who think that more people should be at work than on public subsidy. So I think the major cut right now was just the falling off of all of the COVID excess. So Ash, our budget going into October, now that we'll approve a budget, and y'all approve a budget in January, but the October totals was 177 or 100 and.
I would have to, I want to say that that's about right, but I would have to look.
180, let's say 180 million. It's no longer a $200 million operation. And that has nothing to do with anybody. You know, it's excused because the federal government is pulling back a bit and because there was so much thrown at the program, particularly in childcare during COVID. So I just put that on the record, is that you'll see a decline. I noticed that we're not stepping up any insurance, and that was really what guided us. It's not like we're receiving additional revenue and need to do something else. The money is collateralized with our bank. Bank of Texas, thank goodness, has finally turned the corner. It took about a year to transition banking, but that again was a 30-year relationship with Comerica. So this has been kind of difficult, but Comerica got out of the business of collateralization, as most banks have, and Bank of Texas took us on. So between the insurance in front of you and the collateralization of money, we're in a good fiduciary place. And I will tell you, as I'm working with Joanne in governance, this is the most important duty of the board. Oversight of financial. It is the most important duty of the board throughout the federal law. The reason taxpayers are looking at what we do with the money, particularly do we comply? So just want to put that out.
Just a question about the coverage and inflation. That, if it's the same dollar coverage, and of course we've had inflation that's not been insignificant over the last couple of years, when do we start accounting for that?
That's an excellent question.
It is. I think Marsh McLennan has done a good job of anticipating worst scenario and maybe overbuying in the past, maybe pushing us out a little further. At one time we were at a point where we needed to pull back in. So looking at this set of policies, I can't think of a situation that we've encountered that would in any way pressure this, would in any way say we're not insured with pretty good confidence, wouldn't you, Ash? I mean, you've been through it. How long have you been? You've been CFO now for 4?
Going on 5, yeah.
5. And then prior to that, you were the senior for?
I was the accounting manager.
For how long?
For 4 years.
So in that 8-year, we did not have a claim of any consequence. I mean, I fell out of a chair. That was the big Southwest Center issue. We took the wheels off all the chairs, by the way. We had, I fell in the parking lot, which we did not cover. Things like that do come up. But to say, I think the biggest claim, would that have been the cyber issue? The biggest claim in all of ours, which is by our standards and insurance less than consequential in terms of dollar. But Dan, I hope we're there. I hope we're covered. I think Ryan at Marsh McLennan gives us great confidence that he is anticipating, looking at our history, looking at our risk. He's very nervous with us initially, but he's been with us long enough now to calculate where we need to go up. And he and I actually meet once a year, and he always says, what else do you want to do? And if I can think of something else, I usually throw it in. That's how we got cyber. We were the first board in the state to pull cyber, thank God. now that we see all the damage that's going on, we have a long history now with our broker, and even with our incident, they didn't go up, Ash?
We went
Nope.
down. The premium went down.
It could have been so much worse. I think that's their attitude. It's like, oh, that's nothing. Go down to City Hall. We have no issue, no real issues here.
Yeah, it
So-
can work like that. The formula can be with experience ratio. It could actually push you down with a claim. You're right.
Exactly. Yeah.
Anyone,
That's why
any other
we're not gonna-
questions?
We're not asking you to move either. We
Right,
think
right.
stay with these companies. We had a slightly less expensive option. I'm like, no, please don't touch anything for right now as we transition.
Mhm.
Then
Yeah.
I'd say give it 2 years, and then you as a board should look at it again and see if there's anything that you want to add, but don't wait until the summer. They do renew July 1. So we need to
Yeah.
pull this back to the February meeting if there's any suggestions. And maybe Ryan, have a whole call with the committee, Ashley, in the spring.
He would be more than happy to.
I think
And
that would be
we
good.
can add something mid-year too, if we wanted to.
With a new
That's a good-
exec, yeah.
That's a good idea, I think.
Well, and Dan, to your point, I think most of the time inflationary issues are relating to assets. And if you're insuring a building, you have to rebuild it and the cost of that. We just don't have that because we don't own any property. So I think our risk as far as inflationary pressures is minimal, other than litigation.
Yeah, this looked well within norms, like we hadn't been oversold by anyone. Any other questions or comments? What action item do we need on this?
We will want to take to the board in the August meeting to ratify the coverage renewals for this year.
Okay,
And before I move on to the next item on the agenda, I just want to briefly address health insurance for our employees. Our benefit year is the calendar year, and we normally don't receive quotes from our health insurance broker until October. Now, we did receive them early enough in October of last year that I was able to bring an estimate to you all at the October board meeting, but I want you to know that was really out of our norm. Usually we don't receive the quotes early enough in October to have any conversation at the board meeting. If we can get something this year early enough, we will certainly bring something to you at that last board meeting of the year. Otherwise, we will ask for board approval to allow the president to move forward with renewing health insurance before January 1st, 2024, and bring that back to the board for ratification in the new year, as we have done in the past. So nothing.
makes
to report.
sense.
So our last, yes.
I just want to put in my 2 cents worth, and this is, I would hope that the new exec would be very cautious, as the board would be cautious, to live with the benefits for a while instead of making that a major cost-cutting issue the first year. I think it has been a big factor in the stability of the staffing. The fact that I have 25-year people, that I have 10 and 12 and 14-year people. The benefits are in lieu of being able to pay a higher salary, because we are guided by federal for me, but state salaries. We can't pay above state salary classification. Well, but we don't have state benefits, and we don't have the benefit package at retirement that the state would provide. So I just caution that benefits and thinking that's a quick win to show, a change. I would hope that you'd kind of guide that exec to say, let's do that in 24, 25. Let's do that in 26. Let's make sure that we keep the staffing that we need and that doesn't become a lightning rod. Just a little advice.
It's a very important point. Every study I've seen, and I've seen a lot, which stacks the priorities of employees, it actually plays differently when you say, what do you want? And then what can I take away from you? And health benefits don't stack up that high when you say promotions, money, pay. When you say, and if I remove something or cut something, number one is don't cut my health benefits. So that's the one you go home and whoever your partner is or family, you feel bad. So yeah, be careful on that.
Good point. Well, I think that transitions well into the last item I have here for discussion, review and approval of the continuation of a 2% employer match. So I want to give a quick overview of what I sent you all before the meeting. First, as an aside, the agency does contribute 5% of employees' salaries to the defined contribution plan for employees who have been with us for 1 year or more. Now, the 2% match came about from some funds we had through a demutualization of Principal Mutual Holding Company, when they converted to Principal Financial Group in 2001. Principal is our retirement plan administrator. The money the agency received from the demutualization was required to be utilized for the limited purpose of providing employee benefits to current or future organization employees. And that is how the match was born. In 2018, the board approved initially providing a one-time 10% contribution to employees on record at that time, along with a 2% matching contribution annually going forward until the funds were depleted. And we are now reaching that point. We have just over $20,000 remaining, and board staff proposed the continuation of the 2% matching contribution through our normal TWC funds. So in the same manner that we fund the 5% contribution moving forward. This potential 7% employer contribution is in line with what other boards are contributing across the state. I've polled the other boards, and of those who responded, all are providing some kind of matching contribution. Many are also funding a defined contribution in addition to the match. Total employer contributions range from 5 to 10%. Additionally, I would note that participation from our employees since instituting the match in 2018 has increased. Pre-match, 84% of our employees were contributing to their 403B plan, and as of fiscal year end 2022, 94% were contributing. The 2 employees who were not contributing at the end of last year were new employees in the last quarter of the year. So in conclusion, again, we would like to take this to the board for a vote in August to continue funding that 2% match through our grant funding as a continued benefit for our employees.
Any comments, questions? I support this.
Yeah, I support it too. I'm just wondering, is this an opt-in or opt-out situation that we have?
Opt-in.
Opt-in, okay. You know, one of the things that on another board, a retirement committee board that I've been on, is we moved to an opt-out, and the reason for that was that it was in a sense a way to really encourage savings and contributions and to have people do what they should be doing for their own retirement. And there's a lot of studies. There's a recent book out called Nudge, NUDGE, where it makes a big difference whether you set it up as an opt-in or opt-out, and maybe something that you all want to give some consideration to.
We absolutely can, yeah.
Good, thank you.
Principal has asked, do you want it opt-in or opt-out? So we can make that change.
Actually, I'm really happy that you were able to reach out to peers and get that poll. Is that quick? Is it easy to get that information?
Well, and I heard back from out of the 28 boards, what I have here. Well, I only heard back from 12. So
okay.
It took some time, but the ones that did respond, they were pretty quick. I mean, that wasn't a horrific experience by any means. It's just how could we get everybody to respond would be nice.
Yeah.
And
I'm gonna
Harry,
keep driving that. I'm gonna keep driving that practice. I think it's really good to have on almost everything you do, is to get that kind of buy, and I think it will increase. Sorry, Lori.
I just want to say we are operating at such a level of independence as a nonprofit with so many business practices. Most boards don't even understand the question. I started with governance. I was told, go find some more governance plans. And I got weird looks, and I don't think so. And why would you need that? Because too many of them are still governmental. They're not operating as a 501c3. But the other thing, councils of governments control 6 or 7 boards, and then a large portion of the boards actually have their staff working out of the West Central Council of Governments. Council of Governments, if you're in my job, you're an executive director, but you don't handle lawyers, you don't handle procurement, you don't handle leases, and you don't handle the finances. All that's done by the Council of Government overarching. So it's very hard to do apples to apples in our business, very hard. And when you go looking, there might be 2 or 3 that operate where we operate, but not with the same amount of money. We're unique. I know, and unique in the nation because no other state affords childcare to the local workforce boards. Well, I thought I had made this clear a long time ago, but I keep getting interesting questions as we're peeling the onion and going through strategic plan conversations, governance conversations. It really is interesting to me that I've not been able to convey how unique we are. It keeps occurring that surely other boards, and no, not other boards. They really don't operate at this level. We might do better comparing ourselves to nonprofits in Dallas, nonprofits of similar size than workforce.
That's
boards.
a good idea. Yeah.
So,
I've just found that, just sharing with peers is really important.
and we do a lot of sharing. They ask us
Yeah.
all the time.
Yeah. It goes both ways. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyone else have any questions or comments? Okay.
Need action on all 3?
Yep.
Mhm.
So I am satisfied and ready to say that we should move to accept the results of the audit report, to get that to the board, and as well, I'd like to move forward with both of the other action items. Dan, what is your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree, and I'll second that motion.
So we move to on all 3. Ashley, do I have to go one by one, or is that good?
Nope, that is good for me. Mhm.
Okay.
Well, good. That brought us to the end of all the subject matter, and now we have general discussion or other business. If you all have anything you want to discuss.
Good work. I think it was very pointed. I thought it was good discussion. I think that's where we want to be. And I like how we're leaning into, what else can we do? Can we do a little better? We're not just getting a pass fail.
Yeah.
One thing as we move forward, there will be timing on banking change. We've already kind of secured a new credit card because the credit card for the company was in my personal accounts. I had backed it up because we don't have income. We don't have property. We don't have collateral. So it was on my credit rating that we got a credit card with Bank of America. We've worked our way onto the Bank of Texas card. I am not identified with that card at all, and I'm not a user on that card. So we're keeping this card until I'm through, and we have a new exec. I think you should think we've made the decisions most of the time. I've been here forever. I sign all the checks still. I don't think the new exec probably will do that. They won't be familiar with the paperwork, but I'm going through all the checks after Ashley approves them or Alicia puts them in, Ashley approves them, I sign them. I do believe with a new exec, you need to think through who is on what accounts. How do you want to proceed with this? I know, Carter, when you were treasurer, hey, treasurers don't sign checks, but you're on the account. As the chair, you're on the account. Do we stick with officers on the account? I don't think we solved this today, but I think it is a thought process as we migrate to something different, find out who your new exec is, and then talk through who does what. We are living on tradition that has proven to be really workable. We have good audits, good monitoring reports, but be aware when the monitors come out in November, they don't know what 25,000 is. They literally will charge us back for $2.50 if they find it in the record. It is completely ridiculous, but that is what they do. And they go through 80, 90 transactions at random, but they're not really at random. They're smart samples. Dan?
Yeah, Lori, thanks for that. Just following up on the benchmarking point that Harry brought up. I think that's a great idea and would encourage it across the board as well. But in terms of the Texas WFS groups around the state, which are the ones that are the most sophisticated, that are most like our peers? I understand we've got 28 of them around the state, but many of them are small and unsophisticated, but which of the WFS boards around the state are most like us in terms of the level of sophistication?
It's a great question, Dan. And I will say the sophistication oftentimes comes with the volume of resource. So we have Texoma, who is extremely good, innovative, but they get no money whatsoever. It's ridiculous. There are 6 of us, 7 of us in the large board area who get enough money to be innovative, to be cutting edge. 2 of those are councils of governments, as I described. So their sophistication is in another realm. It's not really handled by their board staff. It's up and above. Like North Central is known for their technology system. I wouldn't have it. It's so complicated, it drives people crazy. But that's what they do really well. They have trouble finding people for childcare. They have trouble meeting measures, but they have a, just rock star kind of tech system. You go down to Gulf Coast, they have Houston is the center city. They don't have a Dallas Fort Worth. So you have one city and a sprawling 13 county region. I've worked that area. They do extremely good partnering with the Houston partnership. So the degrees, I think, of innovation and sophistication have to do with the market. Austin is amazing, but when you transition from a mayor to a new mayor, sometimes you get a flutter there of how much is going on at the board level. I think in Austin, they did very well with a transition in mayor, as did Austin. Both of those received huge investments from COVID money from their cities, like $30 million going to the local workforce board to do more innovative things than WIOA funds would provide. So training became unusually unique. We didn't get any of that. So it just depends on what you want to look at. Are they diversifying funding? Are they getting more local support from electeds and from nonprofits? Our support from non-federal money has come from outside Texas. It's been from nonprofits, Go ahead.
You've mentioned North Texas, Texoma, Austin, and Gulf Coast. But I thought you said there were 6 or 7.
Well, Texoma's a little board. The large boards, Ash, do you have it in front of you? It's Gulf
San
Coast.
Antonio.
Well, Alamo, yes. Gulf Coast, Alamo, Dallas, Tarrant, North Central Texas, which is our Council of Governments. And there's 2 in the Valley. I'm not looking at the list, guys. Sorry. The Valley is different. Go ahead, Ash.
Middle Rio?
Middle Rio. Yeah. There's the Valley boards operate very, very differently because their population is very different. So they're very concerned right now about Wi-Fi connectivity. Let me do a little kind of, I'll do a little mapping myself and share it with this group only. We'll send it out and see if you guys think it's worth pursuing. And I'll tell you who's just my reflection as to who's doing what and where to look.
That'd be good. And the practice of benchmarking and peer grouping is just an ongoing thing, and it could even be nationalized. There could be a place like San Diego or San Jose. We brought our police chief in for Dallas, and he's a rock star from San Jose. And I just think there's things that don't seem apples to apples that could be, and maybe there's, like you say, there's some things that look similar, but because of the governance, it's not. And that's a point well taken.
I'm happy to do that. Nationally, we do. I actually sit in a committee from Jobs for the Future and NOB, where it was created from the cutting edge boards. And I will get you that list. San Diego is among us. Charlotte, there's a few that are really good, but not a lot coming from Texas in that respect. National is looking at, can you break the barriers? Can you bring in private money? That kind of thing. So I'll do the national as well.
Well, and I would just add that there's a National Association of Workforce Boards that we go to every year. There's the State Association of Workforce Boards by TWC where we go to. And then there's the Texas Association of Workforce Boards, which is what you're talking about. And we do share best practices and we do reach out to one another, as Ashley does, did talking about peers. So there are organizations that help us do that. It's not like cold calling and you've never heard from us before, but we need your payroll numbers.
Yeah,
It's very warm and very easy to do, but to Lori's point, we're not all the same.
it's relationship building enough where you can say, what drives you crazy? And then Ashley goes, this drives me crazy. And then your peer goes, yes, me too, but here's my solution.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, Ashley ran to the top of the list statewide. She was asked within the first year of being the CFO to chair the state CFOs. Not many of them have a CPA. Not many of them have the structure and systems we have. So we are kind of everybody's go-to. What are they doing in Dallas?
It's a good problem to have. You know, we're good enough, big enough that it's hard to find peers, but I still think it's super important. So I want to commend you for doing that, Ashley. Anything else?
I would like to revisit one thing Lori mentioned about checks. So right now we still have Bill's signature on our checks. The decision was made not to make any transition at the beginning of 2023. So that's something we might want to revisit in the future. Do we leave it as the past chair signing checks, the chairman, the treasurer, or another option is to not have a member of the board sign the checks? I did talk with the auditors last year and asked them, what are you looking for? They were just looking for the president or president's designee signature. So just something to keep in mind.
You know, you remember when I got here, guys, we literally had files of checks and I would sit and sign and the treasurer would sit and sign or the chair would sit and sign. So we've come a long way, but with COVID, I think we were pushed farther, faster with now electronic transactions and electronic checks. So some of our biggest transactions are actually going through banking relationships. So the checks that we sign are minor.
Yeah.
Utilities are well, a lot of that goes to the credit card too now.
It does.
Because you were trying to do virtual and make sure people got paid in a timely. There's very few paper check transactions, but we should think it all the way through. Everything we are doing is simply history and evolution of history. We just kept pace with the times, but COVID pushed us pretty far. So that would be something to look at too, as to how other boards are doing it. I'm guessing the one signature, I think the two signatures. When I took this job, this board had been front page fodder for 2 years and really bad. It was a lawsuit, sexual harassment, non-going, just junk. 87, 88. It was bad, and it was bad statewide about Dallas. So I think we were more protective and more careful because nobody knew what we were getting into. They were trying to make sure that the board had put in checks and balances. That was the critical issue. And so that's kind of why I say with me going and you've got a new, do they step into exactly the systems that I was, tending, or does the board look at what do you want? What do you want to put in place? So.
Sounds wise. All right. Anything else, or is this committee meeting closed? All right, we can stop recording and thank everyone.
Yes.
Thank you guys. Appreciate
right.
everyone coming.
Appreciate your
Thank you,
time.
everyone. Good
I'll
work.
get you some notes, Harry, so you can